So Jerome Powell just went on camera claiming he's the victim of political intimidation. The Fed chairman, the guy that's in charge of setting interest rates for the entire US economy, well, he posted a video Sunday night saying that the Justice Department is threatening to indict him. And here's his explanation. Trump's trying to pressure him on monetary policy. Today we're examining public statements from Fed Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell about a Department of Justice investigation that went into congressional testimony and the Fed Reserve's operations. So welcome back to the channel, and if you're new here, buckle up, because what I'm about to show you is the definition of missing the forest for the trees. And for those of you who've been here, you know what I bring. I bring the receipts, so here's what we're going to dive into today. Jerome Powell claims the DOJ investigation is political intimidation. Why this investigation is actually happening, and the absolutely insane number that explains everything. So if you want daily breakdowns just like this, we cut through all the nonsense. Be sure to hit the subscribe button. Let's get into it. So according to Breitbart News, the DOJ served the Fed with grand jury subpoenas on Friday. Powell says prosecutors are looking into his testimony before the Senate Banking Committee last June. And Powell's claim is that this is all about forcing him to cut rates to please President Trump. Now, let me set this up properly for you, because you need to know the full context to appreciate how absurd this is. Powell goes on camera and says, and I'm paraphrasing here, but this is kind of the gist, this is about whether the Fed will be able to continue to set interest rates based on evidence and economic conditions, or whether monetary policy will be directed by political pressure. Very dramatic, very noble. The principled Fed chairman standing up to the mean president. And according to NBC News, Trump denied even knowing about the investigation. Trump told reporters, "I don't know anything about it," but he's certainly not very good at running the Fed, and he's certainly not very good at building buildings. Now pay attention to that last part, because Trump just said the quiet part out loud. Not very good at building buildings. So let me tell you what Powell conveniently left out of his dramatic victim video. Again, according to Breitbart News, the investigation isn't primarily about interest rates. It's about Powell's testimony regarding the Fed Reserve's office renovations in D.C. And here's where it gets good. According to multiple reports, including Trump's own statements, these renovations were supposed to be a simple fix-up. Maybe $50 million. Standard government projects, spruce up the offices, maybe a new carpet or some fresh paint. The current estimate, $2.5 billion. Let me say that again, $2.5 billion for office renovations. That's with a B. And according to the reports, Trump toured the construction site in July alongside Jerome Powell and was understandably furious about the cost overrun. Because that's not a renovation, that's not even a cost overrun. That's building the Taj Mahal. That's 50 times what it should have cost. If you hired a contractor to fix your kitchen for $2,000 and they came back asking for $100,000, you'd call the police. But sure, the investigation definitely is about Trump trying to intimidate him into lowering interest rates. That makes total sense. I mean, the Justice Department is threatening criminal charges because Trump wants cheaper borrowing costs. Not because somebody apparently burned through $2.5 billion of taxpayer money on office renovation. So this is just shocking, Jerome, because you know that it just doesn't make sense. You really couldn't possibly be under investigation for the fact that you turned a $50 million project into a multi-billion-dollar catastrophe, while you were supposed to be focused on, managing the economy. Now here's the pattern that you need to understand. According to the New York Times, the investigation was approved in November by the U.S. Attorney for D.C. Donald Trump wasn't even inaugurated yet when this got greenlit. And according to Breitbart, Trump posted back in August that he was considering a lawsuit against Powell over the renovation mismanagement. In fact, back then, Trump wrote, and I'm quoting here, $3 billion for a job that should have been $50 million fix-up? That's not so good. So this isn't new. Trump's been calling out this disaster for months. This isn't political intimidation over interest rates. This is accountability for what appears to be a catastrophic mismanagement of a construction project. But Jerome Powell wants you to believe that it's all about monetary policy because that sounds more noble than I got investigated for possibly giving bad testimony about why we spent $2.5 billion on office space. Look, here's the thing about Fed independence. It's important. The Fed Reserve should be able to set interest rates based on economic conditions and not political pressure. Nobody's arguing that. But the Fed independence doesn't mean that Fed chairmen get to waste billions of dollars of taxpayer money without any oversight. So Jerome Powell testified before Congress about these renovations. And if that testimony was accurate, great. If there were any questions about that testimony, given that costs ballooned to 50 times the original estimate, then yeah, maybe the Justice Department should ask questions. That's not political intimidation, that's called accountability. And by the way, let's talk about Powell's record for a second. According to widespread economic analysis, Powell kept rates too low for too long during the pandemic, and this contributed to inflation. Then he raised rates too aggressively, nearly triggering a recession. So Trump's been critical of Powell's monetary policy decisions throughout both of Trump's terms as president. So when Powell says this is about Trump pressuring him on rates, nah, Trump doesn't think you're doing a very good job is the problem. And he said that publicly, multiple times. But this investigation, and again, this is according to multiple reports, it's all pointing back to congressional testimony. But here's where the good news is, and I actually mean this. Accountability is back. For years, we've watched federal agencies and officials operate with basically zero oversight. Billions disappear, projects go 50 times over budget, and nobody gets asked any questions. Nobody gets investigated. Nobody's held responsible. Now the Justice Department is asking questions about congressional testimony and a $2.5 billion cost overrun. And suddenly we're supposed to believe that that's political intimidation? No, not at all. That's actually the government working the way it's supposed to. If you testified before Congress, your testimony should be accurate. And if you're managing a renovation project, maybe it shouldn't cost 50 times the estimate. These aren't unreasonable expectations. These are actually the bare minimum standards for running a Federal Reserve or any government agency for that matter. So here's what I need you to do. First, hit that like button. It helps our channel a lot and it gets the algorithm to push stories like this out to other people. Second, comment down below and answer this. Should government officials be investigated when projects go 50 times over the budget? Let me know, yes or no. And third, subscribe to this channel and hit that notification because the media is going to run with this Powell victim intimidation narrative. And somebody needs to point out that this is all points back to a $2.5 billion elephant in the room. Look, Jerome Powell can claim this all about Trump and interest rates if he wants, but the facts tell a different story. According again to the reporting we reviewed, the DOJ is looking into Powell's congressional testimony about renovating the Fed in D.C. So this isn't about political intimidation. It's about oversight, and that's accountability, and that's Donald Trump showing you that the system is actually working. And if Powell's testimony was accurate and everything was above board with these renovations, then he's got nothing to worry about. The investigation will clear him. and we'll move on. But if there are questions about how a $50 million project became a $2.5 billion total disaster, then yeah, maybe somebody should be asking these. We all know that Fed independence is important, but so is fiscal responsibility in D.C. And the American people deserve answers when their money disappears by the billions. And it's not intimidation, it's just common sense. So stay informed and stay skeptical. Remember, when somebody plays the victim card, always ask yourself what they're not telling you, because usually the part they're not telling you is the most important part of the story. I'll see you in the next video.
We won!
Okay, let's go.
We won!